With all of the offensive line misses Nick Caserio has drafted, should the Houston Texans rush rookie Aireontae Ersery out on the field to start year one, or should they preserve him and only put him on the field when he's ready? That conversation will be held with Gophers guru Daniel House on this episode, in addition of the Rookie Diaries podcast.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Red Nation, from H-Town to your town. Today's show and all shows are for Texan fans all around. It's your boy, John Hickman. I put the H in Houston Texans Talk. Thank you for making this show the first listen of your day, for being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to all of our everydayers out there. Super excited for today's show and conversation that we'll have with Daniel House, the Minnesota Gophers guru, covers everything Minnesota, UNM. And this show will be much more of an introductory to the rookie, Aireontae Ersery. We'll dive into the reality of Ersery and the possibility of him starting at some point during year one. Are the Houston Texans ready for that? With Nick Caserio's history of drafting offensive linemen, no stud as of yet, no clear-cut Pro Bowler, the best offensive lineman that the Houston Texans have had over the last 3 to 4 seasons since Nick Caserio has taken over. He's inherited those players. Aireontae Ersery could be the one that could change that entire narrative. So Daniel House will join the show to discuss some of his good things, some of his positive, and his flaws. And should the Houston Texans realistically expect for him to be out on the field at some point during this year? We know that Cam Robinson has been starting at left tackle for the Houston Texans. We also dive into the journey to H-Town for Aireontae Ersery, all of the things that he's been doing. He's been working on since he started playing football, which ironically wasn't until his sophomore, junior year in high school. So I can't wait for the conversation to be had. Without further ado, it's Locked On Texans. It's going to be Daniel House, Gopher Guru. Let's talk the rookie. Let's talk Aireontae Ersery. Super excited for today's conversation with Daniel House, the Golden Gopher Guru, covering Minnesota football. All things Minnesota, right?
All things Minnesota, man. University of Minnesota, lots of sports, and mostly football, though.
Listen, you can't call yourself the guru and not have a good indication on the type of player that rookie tackle Aireontae Ersery is. I know you've been covering him for a while. So the question I want to start with is, in regards to Ersery, can you give our listeners a little bit of background information on the young man?
The fascinating part about Aireontae is he actually didn't start playing football until his junior year of high school. He's down at a satellite camp. Minnesota's coaches are down watching players and evaluating. And Kirk Shiraka, he's the offensive coordinator at Rutgers now. He's used to be Minnesota's offensive coordinator. He saw Aireontae out on the field. He's wearing blue shorts, and he watched him work out, and he said, man, we need to offer blue shorts. And so Minnesota offers blue shorts, and Aireontae turns out to be just, long, athletic, just a developmental player for Minnesota. And as time went on and he got in the strength program, started to refine all the technical elements, he just continually improved and then worked his way into being a second-round draft pick. So Minnesota went and found him at a satellite camp. So you wonder about his path. If he hadn't been at that satellite camp and had a great workout, what would have happened? So I think that's what Texans fans have to remember is here, he hasn't played football all that long in his life. Right. So there is a lot of potential here to even ascend further. And, he played in the Big Ten. He got experience against a lot of very talented rushers. So, with the need that the Texans have along the O-line, this makes a lot of sense for them to select him.
You said a word that I can't wait to dive more into later in our conversation, but it's that P word floating around, potential, man. Potentially, what can he be? Can he be a perennial Pro Bowler, get a couple of All-Pro honors? Or for the Houston Texans, that they've made some draft picks, offensive line unit, but those guys haven't panned out yet. And he is the one guy that I wholeheartedly believe the Houston Texans need to work out. And he has been described as a reserved, quiet person. So for those who may have not watched a lot of Gopher games this past
Yeah.
season, does that reservation show up on the field, or is there a switch in his game? Now, I watched him over the weekend, watching some tape. You can get a little nasty, but for Texan fans and more so D'Amico Ryans, they are looking for nastiness on an offensive line. Can you give us more insight on just the switch from kind of staying to himself, doing his own thing, to when he's on the field, it's a little different beast?
Yeah, he definitely has that calm demeanor, but the switch comes on. Like the physicality and the run game, being able to work into the second level, the mobility in his game is a strength, being able to work up combinations and get up into the second level, seal perimeter edges, reach guys. The mobility piece is excellent. The lateral agility, the quickness. He's got good length. I think he developed even more core strength over time and ability to bend and get underneath defenders. You look at what he was able to do, Minnesota, being a wide zone team with his own blocking elements, being able to, get out and work in space, be effective in the screen game. He's just very athletic. And that's something that I feel you look at kind of where the Texans are going with their run game, a little bit of a change with the offensive coordinator, Nick Caserio, and maybe some more gap scheme elements dashed in with the zone stuff, maybe going away from what, Bobby Slowick was doing with all the heavy wide zone. You might see more gap scheme elements and being able with his physicality and his mobility, being able to pull him a little bit and also still use him in the zone concepts. I think he's going to really help in the run game. And there's a lot of stuff that they can continue to work on, hand technique wise, pass protection, set footwork, all those things that will continue to enhance just based on his physicality, his physical skills, and his athleticism. So, based on where the Texans are going with their blocking scheme and a potential change there, I thought this pick made a lot of sense just based on Aireontae's background and his strengths, weaknesses, and overall potential moving forward.
Daniel House, the Golden Gopher Guru. Make sure that you check out all of his great work at gophersguru.com. I want to continue with this conversation. Listen, I believe that where this offense will go is going to be very important for them. And they've stated it multiple times. Hey, we're going to do a multitude of different things in terms of what the scheme will look like. For Bobby Slowick, who was the Texans offensive coordinator for the past 2 seasons, he came directly from the Shanahan tree. Nick Caserio comes from 2 different backgrounds, right? So it's going to be important for them to kind of switch it up, especially in the run blocking game. And that's more so of a question that I have for our second part of this conversation. To continue with our conversation right now, where was the biggest area of growth in his game physically and mentally since stepping on the campus?
I just say overall, physically coming in, he had to learn a lot of the technical components because he hadn't played all that much football. So this was a full development project, and to see him make that progression over time with what Minnesota was asking him to do, protection wise, and in the run game. This is a program where running the football is a huge part of what they do. So, the ability to, have a lot of experience in the outside zone, the inside zone, the duo schemes, all the things that Minnesota did in the run game, that's going to be very valuable. I think the mental piece for Aireontae, they put a lot of emphasis on, the vision, being able to see exactly what you're trying to accomplish with the fronts that are being presented your way. Minnesota puts a huge emphasis on, training the eyes. So I think that's something that fans will probably notice a little bit, is just his comfort level with identifying fronts, knowing where the landmarks are, being able to execute effectively in the run game, be physical and mobile in that category. So it was a holistic, well-rounded development for Aireontae. I think the big thing in his game now is just going to be, the consistency, footwork, hand technique, picking up stunts, being able to effectively ID, those type of things. You saw flashes in those areas, but I think like consistency wise, there's some areas he can improve in that. So, just a lot of continued growth and potential based on, his background and how little he's actually played football. But being in the Big Ten, getting a lot of experience there is huge as he translates up.
The Big Ten matters. That's what some of those premier pass rushers come out of. And we all saw the one-on-ones that he had with Abdul Carter this past season. And I think he held him to zero pressures. So if everything works out for the Houston Texans, he's going to be a stud, and he is envisioned to be this team's next premier tackle. Might not be this year, but soon. And what kind of tackle should the Texan fans expect? And what is his actual game on the field like? We have more from Daniel House as we talk about Aireontae Ersery on this edition of the Rookie Diaries. However, Houston Texan fans, before we continue with our conversation, it's very important for us to dive into things that matter the most. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just another budgeting app. No. It's a complete financial command center, a place where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. I started using Monarch Money. I realized just how much money I was spending on frivolous things. Now I budget smarter and move smarter. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even playing long-term goals. You can do everything from this app, guys. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Thank you for staying locked in on the Locked On Texans podcast. Got my man Daniel House, all things Minnesota football, Minnesota basketball, all things Minnesota. University of Minnesota does a very good job of covering the Minnesota Golden Gophers over at gophersguru.com. Over the weekend, I did some film study on the Rook. And what popped out to me, his hands will get caught being a little high, Daniel. And with the expectations Houston has for him, how cautious, and this is probably the question that everybody needs to know, how cautious should Houston Texan fans be, and how cautious should the Houston Texans be before getting him on the field? And also, can you discuss a little bit more of what his flaws are in this game right now?
Yeah, I just think that, it's consistency with him. You saw, flashes of being very effective in that area. I think, you look at like the lateral quickness rushers. So like when he's got stunts and stuff like that going on, there's sometimes where, like you say, hands can get high, or, footwork maybe gets a little bit out in front of the skis a little bit. But, I think he has the length, the quickness, the lateral agility traits, the ability to, anchor down. I think he's got the ability to bend down, bend and anchor against rushers. I think it's just, all about everything tying together perfectly and getting, Minnesota, you look at it, like last year was the first year where they were more of a high volume passing offense. They had a little bit more of a quick game that was an extension of the rushing attack. You look at the previous years with Minnesota, they were really a run heavy team. So, getting more experience last year in the pass protection set side of it, just based on volume, I think that will be beneficial for him as he moves forward here. Get some more time with NFL coaching, gets adjusted to the scheme, and then also playing, like we said, in a scheme that will be diverse from a run game standpoint. Minnesota's primarily zone blocking scheme, so I think getting him some opportunities where he can pull out in the gap schemes and showcase some of that mobility. You talk to him, you ask him about what he loves to do. He loves pulling out in space. He loves to be out, running and finding guys, and working up into the second and third levels. His mobility is a strength of his game. So I think, just getting him a lot of volume and pass protection sets in training camp and one-on-ones, and just tuning up all that technique, there's definitely all the physical and athletic traits that you're looking for. And you see, the flashes. You look at his game against Abdul Carter, I thought he had a very strong performance that day. And throughout the season, he had strong performances. But it's just, now moving up, elevating another level, the bar is raised. So I think Texans fans should be very excited about the upside. And then now, just getting some coaching. I'm excited to see what he can be.
And the great thing about it is he'll be going up against guys, Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter, Danico Autry. He'll be going up against some great defenders that can help him tune his game up. And a few of the things that actually stood out to me when I went back and watched some of his tape, a lot of the UCLA tape and a little bit more from a couple of other games. What I like about him is he sits on the setup from finesse rushers, where it's like he does a very good job of just recognizing what the potential move is and doesn't overcommit. And I thought that as a pass blocker, especially filling the void of Laramie Tunsil at some point during his career, the Houston Texans just traded him to the Washington Commanders. Like, that's something that Houston Texan fans should be excited about. Also, has a good punch recovery. And also, like you mentioned, good zone blocker. And also his athletic ability comes out because I counted several plays through the tape where he's giving his quarterback more than 3 seconds to throw the ball. Now, we know at the NFL level, it's going to be you got 3, and after that, quarterback is kind of on you. But how he moves his feet laterally, vertically, he does a very good job of that. So he's a player that I think within time, and also with better coaching, as we know the Houston Texans have suffered from that over the past couple of seasons, man, he's going to be a good player within due time. Now, how would you describe him as a run blocker? And I mean, let's get real gritty with the adjectives. We want to hear nasty here in Houston. We want to hear gritty. We want to hear ferocious. How would you describe him as a run blocker?
I'd say mobile, physical. He's a finisher. He likes to, get out on the perimeter and seal guys off. I remember actually one of his first games was against Nebraska. I think it was like 2020 during the COVID year, and he got thrown in and he had to play because they were short on numbers. And you watch him be able to reach and seal the edge. And I'm like, man, this guy can really flip his hips, and he's super athletic and can work in the zone scheme. And so I think that's something that Texans fans are going to like, is just how much, not only the mobility piece, but he's very physical. Like, he can work up off of double teams and get some good dent for a tackle. Like, he's got good size, good length, good power to blend up with the lateral quickness piece. Like you said, against finesse rushers, I think that was an area that he improved a lot over time, is just recognizing moves and being able to like cut rushers off, and also understand that like how rushers might be setting stuff up over the course of games. So, you look at the projection to the NFL level, I think it's just going to be all about, like we said, reps and understanding that, now with being a Nick Caley scheme, I think there's a lot of potential to unlock even more ability in the run game, just what he can do, with his physicality and the gap schemes and the mobility to be able to, pull out in space.
How would you describe the rookie as a leader in the locker room? And we opened up the show to kind of discussing, he's been described as reserved. I don't want to use the word loner. I think those are kind of two different meanings when you get a little bit deeper into describing a person. But he has been described as reserved. But in the locker room, in his unit, in those coaching meetings, like, how has he been looked at towards as a leader?
I would say he's got a little bit of a quiet demeanor, but he's a fun guy. Like, when he comes up and does media with us, I remember the first time he did media with us, and he was just talking about dancing and showing us his dance moves. And like, he's got a very, dynamic personality when he opens up, and teammates tend to gravitate toward that. He's always laughing and joking around, but there's a time and a place, and he dials in, and he's got a very level head. I think that's something that's important. Like, he's not a guy that's going to lose his cool. He's very, focused, determined, dialed into what he needs to do. And I think that's something that is important. You want a guy that's physical, will play hard, play focused, and not have, a bunch of like, I would say like penalties or stuff like that.
Please say it, because that's what Houston dealt with in 2024, 23.
Yeah, he's definitely not that type of guy, but like it's not like he's not going to play physical. Like I think reserved is something that, a label that people get tossed around and it's like, this guy's quiet and he's not going to play physical. Aireontae is not that way. He's just a super focused, determined type of guy. And I think that's exactly what the Houston Texans needed. You're going into day 2 going, Houston seems like a very logical fit. And, you look at the Texans had definitely valued, they were talking about Minnesota's players and how Minnesota develops talent, what the type of players that they produce. They also took Daniel Jackson as an undrafted free agent wide receiver as well. So they took players from Iowa State, players from Minnesota, definitely had a type of player they were looking for during the evaluation process.
Yeah. Before we close out, I got one more question for you. And this can be a one-word response or however you want to put it, but just something quick. Do you believe that as a developmental prospect coming into Minnesota, as a player that just started to play football in his junior year, the potential is there, but this is a team operating in a championship window. They signed Cam Robinson in the offseason. He's been described as a player that you only want to play at left tackle. Do you believe he's ready for year one to start at some point?
I believe he can play. Yeah, I think he can play right away. I feel pretty confident that the experiences he's gained and just getting reps in training camp, getting adjusted to the scheme, I feel comfortable that he can contribute for Houston right away. It's just dependent on how they kind of, like you said, determine that combination on the offensive line. They might be experimenting a little bit. Sounds like Aireontae is probably going to be a tackle, but could they look at him at guard eventually here? I would say tackle's the best fit for him, though.
Tackle's the best fit. Daniel House, thank you for stopping by. I really appreciate this conversation that we've been able to have after all of the technical difficulties on the back end, but appreciate it. Our listeners will appreciate it as well. Can you let all of our listeners know where they can find your great work in social media?
You can check out my work on gophersguru.com.
And where can they follow you on social?
On social media at Daniel House MN. And just check out the premium content option, $5 a month, get you access to all the content.
There we go, man. Thank you for stopping by, Daniel. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you.
Thank you for making Locked On Texans your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. Training camp is about a month and a half away. You got some mandatory mini camps coming up. Moves are being made. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you for staying locked in on the Locked On Texans podcast. I really appreciate you guys each and every day making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and comment. I want to go over some of the notes that I have for the rookie Aireontae Ersery. Shout out to Daniel House for stopping by. Good hand anticipation from the rookie. This is some of the things that I saw from watching film over the weekend. Has good hand anticipation. Looks to get active in the second level. Looks to get active in space, whether that's on screens or just get into the second level to put a body on a linebacker, creating additional running lanes. And he's a big boy, man. 6'6", 6'6" is great, but he's also 330. He's a naturally big guy, man. And so the Houston Texans can really benefit from that. He's very good as a zone blocker. Can't wait to kind of get back to that, though. But he is a good zone blocker. So you look at the benefit of being in a multiple scheme type of offensive system. And again, man, just watching him shift his feet back and forth, east and west, not losing discipline in that area, right? Giving his quarterback more than 3 seconds to throw multiple times. Like on a couple plays, I'm sitting there counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds to throw. In the Big Ten, where you're going up against some great defensive lines. And so those are some of the pros. Also got a little bit nastier when he got into the red zone. Goal line situation, got a little bit nastier when he got down there, where you can kind of see the quote-unquote reservedness go completely out of the window. And again, these are some of the things that I just liked from his tape. Now, some of the cons, hands will get high. I'm talking about all up on you, on your shoulders. And with that, when he's dealing with some of those finesse or just physical rushers, at times I feel like maybe the ref didn't throw a flag that they should have. In the NFL, that's a whole different story. So in terms of technique, just cleaning up on that part of his game, getting better. Also, and this is where it goes back to zone and gap and just watching him. He is a good zone blocker, but and I'm going to try to describe this as best as I can for our audio listeners. If he had to reach to get to more so of a two-eye defender, he struggled. He struggled, and also the anticipation of where he was going was there. So watching some of the UCLA tape, whenever the three technique was shaded a little bit more so on the inside of the guard, but that's where he had to get to, it was trouble. It was trouble for him. Now, when that, let's go back to the same zone run. Whenever that three technique was shaded more so on the outside of the guard, inside of Ersery, dominated the rep more times than not. But the real concern is I knew what his assignment was by his body stance, how he was coming out of his three-point stance. His body was shifted to where he had to go. More so when there was something there, a little bit more power, a little bit more concrete in terms of the assignment, his body's north and south. You don't know where he's going. And so that's something that I believe he needs to clean up on. I can see defenders crossing his face being an early issue. Now, that's based off the college film. Those guys are working tirelessly each and every day here in Houston to get better reps. But again, he does a very good job of blitz recognitions. So when I think stunts may be an issue for him, but understanding where the blitz is coming from, understanding what the blitz assignment is for him, he does a very good job on that. So those things kind of go hand in hand in terms of negatives and negatives and positives. So with his hands being high, I kind of wonder will Holden be an issue for him early on in his career. If you bring those hands down a little bit more, get a little bit more tighter on the chest plate, he's not going to have no problems. Now, the reality of Ersery and year one impact, I just got to say this, man. 2022, Kenyon Green was drafted to be a Houston Texan. Bust for the Houston Texans. Wish him all the best in in Philadelphia. Recently traded to Philly. And some of the reports come out of OTAs, he was beat on 11 consecutive plays. That's a Philadelphia problem. That's no longer a Houston Texan problem. 2023, Juice Scruggs, Jared Patterson, two guys that feel like whoever doesn't crack the starting lineup, they could be moved on from. Right now, that's a feeling for me. I wouldn't personally do it, but I do feel like of those two, and more so maybe Jared Patterson, because of more so of his versatility. But however Houston looks at both of those players, I could see a scenario where one of those two don't come back. I really can. I think they should probably keep them for depth purposes, all things considered, but I wouldn't rule that out. Juice Scruggs was traded up for 2024. And I didn't trade up for Blake Fisher, but drafted Blake Fisher. The jury is out on 3 of the 4 guys named, with one of those guys being moved out of Houston before they could get to the preliminary stages of contract negotiations. Houston, and especially Caserio, needs Ersery to pan out so bad it's not even funny. They have yet to draft under Nick Caserio. They have yet to draft an offensive lineman that you can absolutely see without a shadow of a doubt being a perennial anything positive in the NFL. We don't know what Blake Fisher is going to be in the NFL. I like Blake Fisher. Can't wait to see him in year 2. Put on some NFL weight. A little bit more of an NFL body. Kenyon Green was what Kenyon Green was for the Houston Texans. But if you look at over the last 3 seasons, or essentially since Nick Caserio took over, Laramie Tunsil, he inherited Laramie Tunsil. Laramie Tunsil was the best offensive lineman. The next best offensive lineman season, I'm inclined to say the 2023 George Fant season. And then after that, Titus Howard, again, a player that Nick Caserio inherited. So you look at two inherited players and a free agent pick that ended up saving the Houston Texans season because of the injuries that the Houston Texans dealt with. Ersery needs to be the guy. And with that being said, there's no rush for him to get on the field this season, guys. There's no rush for him to get on the field this season. There's no rush for him to be a starter. There's no rush because once he gets on the field, Houston cannot afford another Kenyon Green situation. Houston cannot afford essentially for him to not work out for the Houston Texans. Can't afford it because the jury is already out on Nick Caserio. The indication right now around him is, listen, he don't know how to draft offensive linemen, whatever it is. Now, what's working in his favor, Cole Popovich, need for you to save the day. Also, and this is something that was mentioned on the Locked On Texans podcast, I think about a month ago or so. But scheme, coaching, cohesiveness, same page. All of that being in favor of Houston moving forward. The last two seasons, man, what Bobby Slug's offense asked of the offensive lineman, who also had reports multiple voices in the room and one coach in and out and not necessarily teaching the scheme and technique, but just overseeing who starts, was everywhere. So now you have a young man coming into a situation that I think hurt the young man in Kenyon Green, also hurt the other two young players in Juice Scruggs and Jared Patterson. But he's coming into a situation where my coach knows what I'm good at. My coach is teaching me how to be better in all aspects of my game. And also my coach is on the same page with my offensive coordinator. I don't see a need for him to start in year one. If he beats out guys, then that's a different conversation. We also saw him getting some rep at right tackle. What does that mean for Blake Fisher in his future? Not sure. But there isn't a need. It was a need for Kenyon Green to be the starter when he got to Houston. And maybe that hurt him in the long run, but it is not a need. And the reality of it is for Aireontae Ersery, if Houston decides, you know what, right now Cam Robinson is giving us everything that we need. We're paying him $12 million. You can make up to 14. We're going to let you just sit and prepare yourself. Go through a whole year of the offseason program, in-season training, 17 games, preseason, and all that. So when you are ready to go, you are ready to go. Other teams across the NFL, they've been able to draft some very good tackles. The Houston Texans have not been able to do that. They need it, and he could possibly be the one when it's time. The time is that timeline for him to get out on the field. I think it solely depends on the lack of not competition, because I believe we'll see competition, but the lack of talent and the lack of competitiveness from the competition. If he goes out there and he beats out some of these guys that are either vets or guys that are projected to be starters, I don't know how much of a good thing that is for the Houston Texans in the long run. Well, not in the long run, but more so in 2025. And this is one of those championship windows, and you don't want to rush him out there when he's not ready to go yet. We just mentioned some of the things he need to clean up on. You play with your hands high at the NFL level, you're either going to get holding or you're just going to get beat. And CJ Stroud can't afford that. They can't afford to play behind the sticks as much as anymore as they did in 2024. They can't afford for him to get those hits as much as he did in 2024. Don't rush a young man out there. Let him sit, let him grow, let him get on the field when he is absolutely ready. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast and the Rookie Diary series as we continue to just highlight the rookies for the Houston Texans. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Until next time, ladies and gents, Bulls on Parade, Battle Red Nation. Peace. Enjoy your week.